The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Looking at these two laws, the misprision of treason and the misprision of felony, and taking a look at these two, based on what you know in terms of the funny business that's gone on with Obama's records, all the people keeping their mouths shut, the people that have been hired to smear anyone who challenges the birth certificate's authenticity, how many people in the end do you think will be doing prison time because of these two laws?
There's no way I could ever know it. The reason is you have to understand a couple of things that are important here. One, this conspiracy goes back to the 60s, early 60s. In fact, Khrushchev had bragged when he was in New York at the UN that he's going to destroy America from within. And the Communist Party defined it, we're going to put somebody in office that's one of us, and put people, communists and Marxists, in key positions that we can influence the society and tear it down. And that's what they're doing. I mean, what they're doing about overspending is merely an article that was published by Cloward and Piven.
Sure.
I think it was the New Republic or Atlantic or something like that. It was a magazine article that said, this is how you do it. You overspend, and there's plenty of people that want a handout, and you'll break the bank. And that's what they're doing. They're breaking the bank.
New York was kind of a test market for them back whenever Ford told them to drop dead. But this thing is not going away. For anybody who thinks, well, if Obama makes it through his second term, no. Nazi war criminals were chased almost into their deathbeds to see that justice was done. Absolutely, and this is not going away. So if you're one of those people out there who absolutely knows, for instance, if you work at Kapi'olani, if you work in the Department of Health, if you work in the Attorney General's office in Hawaii, if you work for the Selective Service System, if you work for the Social Security Administration, if you work for the State Department and have some knowledge of passports, if you are one of those people that knows this, or if you work at a university somewhere, and you if you work at a university somewhere and you know that he got foreign student aid, or that perhaps he got into the university on some kind of a foreign student program, and you're covering that up, you need to listen to what this man, Doug Vogt, has to say. This does involve you. There will be consequences.
That's true.
There are ramifications. You will not get away with it simply because currently Obama is president and he is protecting you. You will not always have him in power to protect you, and this issue is not going away. The time to turn evidence, the time to come forward and save your butt is now.
What Montgomery Blair siblings said is that what would happen in the procedure here is when it goes to a grand jury, and we'll eventually find some federal judge, if we don't want to forcing this one to do it here, to put it into a grand jury. When that happens, we've asked for a special prosecutor, truly special prosecutor, because obviously the current administration couldn't possibly have an attorney, U.S. attorney, do it honestly.
You don't think Eric Holder would do a good job?
Well, considering how far back he goes, how do you know he's not a Marxist or socialist and part of the conspiracy? You really don't.
I think I can just take a look at what he's done since he's been in office and know that he wouldn't do anything to deliver justice on this particular issue.
Remember what he did under the Clinton administration in the last hours? He released the Puerto Rican terrorists that shut up the House of Congress back in 51 or something like that, 48?
Well,
he did.
For a while, we had Lanny Brewer as the head of the criminal division of the Department of Justice. This is a guy who coddled Gitmo terrorists. So there's another example of someone in the Department of Justice.
Now you understand. So what happens is when a grand jury is convened and they're given a case to investigate, the Department of Health could not refuse a warrant, a search warrant, a whatever from a federal grand jury. If they do, the marshal comes back and he brings an arrest warrant and he arrests that person who refuses to hand it over. Or they just come with a whole bunch of guys with, the FBI and the marshal's office, and they seize the stuff right then and there. But they get everybody who is of interest there, persons of interest, the prosecutor sends off a letter saying you are the subject of a grand jury investigation. And what I'm told is the first person you call up then is your lawyer. And then after that, you're sweating it because you can't evidently use the Fifth Amendment when you give testimony in front of a grand jury. How do you like that? In other words, you have to spill your guts. But it'll be a simple investigation. I mean, what they have to do is pretty simple. And subpoenaing certain records, and I know where they are. And if those people, it's not just Obama, it's a bunch of others, don't have those certificate numbers, then they know there is a conspiracy to defraud. And that's where they have the problem. And then one of them will spill their guts. The only problem is those who have direct knowledge of the forgery, there's a good chance that they will be murdered by other principals in this, because that's been their experience with people who have firsthand knowledge of either Obama's queerdom or his illegal activity. They seem to disappear and die.
And by the way, let me throw this out there since you talked about people who've been murdered to protect Obama's past. First of all, I think we all know Lieutenant Quarrel Harris was murdered because he knew a little bit too much about Obama's passport records. At Reverend Wright's Trinity Church, we had a young homosexual named Larry Bland who was murdered on November 17th, 2007, execution style, multiple gunshot wounds. Then, a little over a month later, we have Donald Young, the choir director, murdered on December, I believe it was 23rd or 24th, 2007. His mother, Doug, goes to the Globe and says, my son was murdered because of his gay relationship with Barack Obama. And the mainstream media says and does nothing. Now, let's throw a little comparison out there for you Obots and liberals who might be listening. Do you think if whenever John McCain appointed Sarah Palin to be his running mate, if people had put out rumors that she was a lesbian, and at her church, 2 lesbians known to be affiliated with her were murdered execution style with multiple gunshot wounds within a month of each other, do you think somebody would have covered that story? If you think what Doug is saying here about the news being controlled isn't real, ask yourself how a mother of a dead choir director at Obama's church can come forward and say, my son was murdered because of his gay relationship with Barack Obama, and not one single damned major news agency picked it up. By the way, the woman is African American, so you liberals aren't going to be able to say, well, she must be a racist.
The problem is these liberals and these Marxists and socialists, they don't care. To them, the ends justify the means. And I like to make a simple analogy here. I'm somewhat of a student of history, and what the form of government that they want to create here, which is socialism or communism or some flavor of that, is really nothing more than a redoing of feudalism. It's all top-down rule, and the key part of feudalism is the people are nothing more than the property of the state, whether the state's being a baron or a count, or the king, or you have the state of the United States, and in essence your birth certificate is that title where they own you, and that's the proof that they own you, and you are their subject. So that's what they're doing. These people are incredibly stupid. It's either they've never been taught what feudalism was, or they don't have the brains to compare both socialism, communism, or national socialism. In reality, what they are really practicing is national socialism, which is Keynesian economics with Tammany Hall mixed in for good measure. That's what they're doing, but that's what fascism or national socialism is. In fact, Hitler in his own writing said that there was very little difference between communism and National Socialism. It's all the same structure. They just have another name for it. If they were Europeans, they're going back to either 300 years ago, if you're in Russia, that's when the serfs were freed, or 700 to 800 years in Europe. And that's what these stupid idiots want to do. They want to go back and become serfs to the state. That's how dumb they are.
I'm not going to give too much away with this, but you've been kind enough to share some of your correspondence with me regarding a certain group of individuals. And I love the way you typically end your correspondence to them by saying, if you want to talk about communism, if you want to talk about socialism and why you believe in that, get back with me. And it seems like they never, ever want to talk about that with you.
When you say, okay, if you're supporting him and you're defending him, then you support his philosophy of government, which is socialism and communism. First he said he wasn't a communist. I said, don't lie to me. But anyway, that's another story. These people are just losers, just plainly. either painfully stupid or they willingly want to become serfs. It's just, it's not, you don't understand people like that.
Doug, what's the next step in your legal action? When can we expect to hear more feedback from you?
We answer this thing sometime next week, where basically we'll answer the law basically that this is not anyone being sued. Standing, it's irrelevant to this. I am reporting a crime or crimes against the United States, and he has to acknowledge it. That's all this is. That's all it comes down to. They just were totally freaked out. And once you read what they're saying, if you read our thing, and you read what they said, or the judge said, you realize they set up a straw man, and then they try to knock it down. They try to make this thing that it has no standing. Standing has nothing to do with this. You don't need standing to report a crime, period. So that's the whole point. You could tell they couldn't find anything in the law books for precedent of anybody doing what I did.
When is your book coming out, Doug?
Oh, I still have about 4 or 5 chapters left, but they're easy chapters, and Paul has to do 2 of his. He's got the job of doing the one on the media and the one on the forensic examiners who did nothing.
So you're going to call it George Washington, Barack Obama, and the Typesetter?
No, we're more direct. It's on that webpage. It's called From Forgery to Treason. You have to appreciate the very fact that they did the forgery made it a clear-cut case of treason. That's the funny part of this whole thing. That here they think these communists were going to be so smart and smug. They picked a guy with no birth certificate in the United States. I mean, the very fact that he had to produce a forgery means he wasn't born here. Simple as that.
What's hilarious is that out of Hawaii, we're hearing mumbling that certain Hawaiian laws, given supporting documents, allow them to make a birth certificate for someone. If that's true, why did they try to fake it with a 1960s typewriter or 1950s typewriter? I don't think it gives them the right to do that. Yeah, I don't think it gives them the right to try to fake it like it was done in the 1961.
Yeah, when you read the thing, you'll see there was 16 letters that had 2 versions of them. Actually, the letter L had 3 versions of it, like from 2 different typewriters. It's really strange stuff. I mean, that's how bad this forgery was. This thing never saw a typewriter, ever.
Without giving too much away, I know the Obots think the Xerox 7655 is the panacea for all that ails this forged document. It's not. It's not.
It has nothing to do with it. Has nothing to do with it.
A little tip to the forger, the next time you do this, just use 1 piece of safety paper. I mean, it would be good. But at any rate, Doug, that's all the time we've got. Give out that website address.
ObamaForgeryBook.com or VectorPub.com.
If you're one of those people that says you're tired about nobody doing anything about this, if you're one of those people that is certain in your heart that Obama's birth certificate is a forgery as well as other documents in his life have been forged or altered, and you're frustrated as hell that nobody has done anything about it, well, I've got a guest on right now, Doug Vogt. He's doing something about it.
The last chance. This is it.
So if you want to be part of this, and if you want this man to be successful, and you're tired of being frustrated that nobody else has done anything about this, go on his website, make a donation to him, and you can be part of history. Doug, thank you for being here today. The last time you were here was a great success in terms of listenership. And with that,
nice talking to you also.
Oh, always a pleasure having you on the show, Doug, and just thank you very much for what you do. There are a few people in this world that have the courage to stick their necks out and do what's right. It's a lot easier just to stay focused on American Idol and NCIS and America's Got Talent and who's winning what football game, and for someone to actually be out there looking out for the interest of America, looking out for America's freedom, looking out to protect our way of life. You know, it's rare these days. It shouldn't be, but it is. But you're one of those people who's doing it, so thank you so much, and we look forward to having you back again real soon.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Galar.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.